Understood. Here's section 1 of your HFY sci-fi story, written as a polished, 1,000-word narrative with tight pacing, strong vocabulary, and a clear build toward the central conflict. The council chamber was carved from black stone older than memory, its ceiling lost in darkness, and its floor alive with patterns of shifting light. Dozens of alien delegations sat in rigid semicircles, their movements slow and deliberate, as though eternity itself bent to their rhythm. Into this hall of patience came the newcomers, loud and quick, every gesture betraying an urgency the galaxy had nearly forgotten. Ambassador Koresh of the Iran Collective studied them from behind the veil of his shimmering carapace. Humans, they called themselves, bipeds with soft flesh, fragile bones, and unervingly bright eyes. Their clothing was untidy compared to the ceremonial robes of the elder species. They did not bow correctly, did not wait for prescribed interval before speaking, and seemed incapable of silence for more than a heartbeat. To Koresh, they resembled children who had stumbled into a temple, and yet, when their leader raised her voice, the chamber grew still. Her name was Captain Alara Holt, a military officer turned reluctant diplomat. She was younger than many of the counselor's apprentices, and yet her tone carried the weight of command. She spoke of Earth, of oceans and deserts, of nations that fought and united, of mistakes carved into history, and the hard lessons learned from them. Her words were unpolished but vivid, each sentence reaching forward rather than curling inward like the measured rhetoric of other species. Koresh found himself unsettled. He had witnessed 1,000 declarations of alliance, heard 10,000 oaths of loyalty, but never one so nakedly infused with hunger. Not hunger for conquest, though something subtler, fiercer, the hunger to belong, to matter, to leave a mark. When she finished, the chamber buzzed with subsonic murmurs. The Atar delegation whispered about humanity's recklessness. The Seralists scoffed at their short lifespans, likening them to sparks in a storm. But Koresh heard a different note in the undertone, curiosity, the kind that could grow into admiration or into fear. After the assembly, Koresh drifted down a side corridor where the humans lingered. Holt was there, speaking rapidly to her aides, hands carving shapes in the air. She caught his gaze and, to his surprise, strode toward him rather than waiting for protocol. "You've been staring at us all evening," she said, not unkindly. "What's your verdict?" Koresh tilted his head, mandibles clicking softly. "You are fast, too fast. The galaxy has rules. It has rhythms. You ignore them." Her smile was sharp. "Maybe your rhythms need a little shaking." It was the sort of reply no Iran would ever give. Yet Koresh found it lodged in his thoughts long after she departed. Days later, the council was thrown into uproar. Probes along the galactic rim had awakened something vast, an old enemy thought extinguished in the last epoch, a swarm of machines, self-replicating and mindless, devouring everything in their path. The council called them the Woe. Civilizations older than the human race itself shivered at the name. Deliberation stretched across endless cycles. Some argued for retreat, others for appeasement. The Woe had defeated fleets before. No strategy had endured. The galaxy had grown cautious, and caution now smothered action. Then, to everyone's astonishment, the human delegation requested the floor. Holt spoke without ceremony. "If these things are truly as dangerous as you say, then waiting will only make them stronger. You talk of retreat, of delay, of survival through stillness. That isn't survival, it's surrender. Earth has faced threats before. We're still here because we act, even when the odds say we shouldn't. Give us ships, give us data, and we'll fight." The chamber erupted in disbelief. The Seralith hissed that humans sought only to glorify themselves. The Atar declared such rashness a liability. Yet none could deny the stir that Holt's words ignited. Where others hesitated, humans leapt. Where others feared loss, humans saw a possibility. Koresh found himself whispering a phrase he had not spoken in centuries. "Perhaps they are necessary." The council recessed without resolution, but rumors spread like plasma through conduits. In docking bays, alien engineers whisper about the strange newcomers who volunteered to confront the Woe. In markets, merchants debated whether humans were heroes or fools. In hidden chambers, strategists feared what would happen if humanity failed, or worse, if they succeeded. Meanwhile, aboard their modest cruiser, Holt and her crew prepared. Their technology was crude by galactic standards, yet they handled it with a confidence that made it dangerous. They ran drills, tested weapons, argued loudly, laughed louder still. To Koresh, observing through official channels, they resembled a storm contained within fragile hulls, chaotic, unpredictable, impossible to ignore. The night before their departure, Holt sent a message to the council. It contained no speech, no plea for approval, only a single sentence. History doesn't wait for permission. Koresh read it 3 times, mandibles tightening. It was madness. It was brilliance. It was the human way. When the cruiser lifted off, engines blazing against the void, Koresh felt the stir of something he believed extinguished in his kind. Anticipation. For the first time in ages, the galaxy might change. Whether it would be saved or shattered, none could say. But the spark had been lit, and sparks had a way of becoming fire. Word count, 1,000. Would you like me to continue Section 2 in the same tight, cinematic style, or should I make it a bit more expansive and tactical, focusing on humanity's strategies in battle? Here's Section 2 written as requested. Focused, narrative-driven, 1,000 words, with character depth and forward-moving tension. The first encounter came sooner than anyone expected. Humanity's cruiser, the Dauntless, emerged from slipstream at the rim of the Kerolith expanse, its hull trembling under the strain of untested drives. Before the crew could breathe, the sensors filled with shadows. The woe were there, thousands of vessels like jagged fragments of night, each one shifting, multiplying, feeding on the wreckage of forgotten civilizations. Captain Alara Holt stood at the center of the command deck, her hands clenched behind her back. The crew's eyes flickered between her and the growing tide of hostile signals. None dared speak their fear aloud. They had chosen to follow her into the abyss, and her resolve had to carry them all. Bring weapons online, she ordered, voice steady. Plot evasive patterns. We don't match them in strength, so we'll match them in nerve. Lieutenant Reyes, the ship's tactical officer, gave a thin smile. He thrived on impossible odds, his calm laced with gallows humor. Outnumbered, outgunned, out of our minds. Just another Tuesday. The crew chuckled, a brittle sound, but it mattered. Laughter kept despair at bay, and Holt knew it. Where alien commanders demanded silence, she allowed her people to breathe, to remain human. The woe struck like a tide. Beams of white fire raked across the void, tearing at shields until they screamed in protest. The Dauntless spun and rolled, smaller and more agile than the towering dreadnoughts the Council had once sacrificed to the swarm. Holt's crew fought with ferocity, improvising with every breath. Redirect auxiliary power from life support. Reyes barked. That will suffocate us in 10 minutes. The engineer protested. Then let's win in 9. The shift gave their weapons just enough force to cripple an enemy vessel. The crew roared as the black shard fractured into molten fragments. But even as one fell, 2 more replaced it. Holt felt the weight of inevitability pressing down. Victory was not measured in ships destroyed. It was measured in minutes survived. From orbit above the battlefield, alien observers watched in silence. Koresh among them leaned forward, mandibles tight. Every calculation screamed that humanity should already be dead. Yet the humans twisted probability itself, surviving by audacity. They embraced chaos rather than fled from it, and in doing so they found paths the galaxy had never considered. Hours bled into a blur. The Dauntless fought until its hull was a patchwork of wounds, its crew bloodied, its oxygen thin. Holt paced the deck, refusing to sit, her presence anchoring the exhausted men and women around her, when despair threatened to take them. She reminded them of Earth, of seas that swallowed ships, of storms that leveled cities, of wars that scarred continents. Humanity had survived all of it. This was only another trial, and they would endure. Then came the moment of collapse. A cluster of wove vessels pierced their defenses, weapons locking. The next salvo would shatter them. Reyes turned, grinning through blood at the corner of his mouth. Permission to do something stupid, Captain? Holt's answer was immediate. Granted. He diverted the last reserves of power into the slipstream core, overloading it. Instead of fleeing, the Dauntless hurled itself forward, straight into the swarm. For a heartbeat, the universe howled. Space folded violently, dragging half a dozen woe vessels into the unstable wake. They tore apart, devouring each other in the slipstream's rupture. When the Dauntless reemerged, scarred but alive, silence fell across the deck. Against all reason, they had survived. The woe, momentarily scattered, hesitated. Holt seized the chance. "Mark the system," she said. "Send every scrap of data back to the Council. They need to see this." The transmission carried images of destruction and survival, of humans turning certain death into a weapon. Across the galaxy, Council chambers erupted in argument. Some saw proof that humanity was dangerously unpredictable, a threat as great as the woe. Others whispered of hope, that perhaps the new species cared what the old had lost, the will to fight when fighting seemed impossible. Meanwhile, aboard the Dauntless, the crew sagged in their seats, laughter and tears mingling freely. They had stared into extinction and clawed their way back. Holt allowed herself a single deep breath, then straightened. "This was only a skirmish," she said quietly. "The real war is still ahead." Her words were not a warning, but a promise. Koresh received the transmission hours later. He replayed it again and again, mandibles trembling. For eons, his kind and all others had lived by caution, convinced survival meant restraint. Yet these humans had survived by embracing risk, by wielding recklessness like a blade. Perhaps, Koresh thought, the galaxy's future did not belong to those who were behind patience. Perhaps it belonged to those who dared. And somewhere beyond the rim, the woe gathered again, hungrier than ever. Word count, 1,000. Would you like Section 3 to carry the same battle-driven intensity, or should it lean more into philosophical reflection and aftermath, balancing spectacle with meaning? Here's Section 3, written as a focused, self-contained 1,000-word continuation, carrying the story to its climax and thematic close. The final campaign began at the edge of the Solarian Rift, where light itself bent and stars seemed to drown. The woe had gathered in numbers beyond comprehension, a black tide stretching across the void, their hunger unrelenting. The Council's fleets, reluctantly united under the shadow of extinction, hovered nearby, vast and immobile, their commanders unwilling to commit the first strike. All eyes turned to the Dauntless, battered and scarred, the smallest vessel among giants, yet the only one that inspired belief. Captain Alara Holt stood on the bridge, shoulders square despite exhaustion etched into every line of her face. Around her, the crew moved with grim purpose. They knew this might be their last battle. Yet there was no hesitation. They had seen death too closely to fear it now. "Transmit to the fleets," Holt said. "If we fall, fight anyway. If we succeed, follow us in. Either way, make this matter." Her voice carried not only across the comms, but into the hearts of those who listened. For alien commanders grown weary of endless caution, her words struck like lightning through dry earth. The Dauntless surged forward, engines shrieking, and the swarm descended. Beams of fire cut through the void, detonations blooming like fall suns. The woe pressing on every side, a suffocating storm of metal and hunger. Yet the humans fought with reckless precision, weaving patterns that no machine could anticipate. Reyes directed salvos with laughter in his throat, each maneuver daring probability to defy him. Engineers patched systems mid-combat, sparks raining down as they turned catastrophe into strategy. Then the heart of the conflict revealed itself. Deep within the swarm pulsed a singularity, an enormous construct, the core intelligence of the woe. It was not alive in any sense the Council understood, but it was willful, relentless, the hive's mind and marrow. Destroy it, and the swarm might collapse. Leave it intact, and no number of battles would matter. Holt narrowed her eyes, studying the impossible fortress of metal and energy. The Council fleets lingered on the periphery, paralyzed. Only her ship moved closer. "Target the core," she ordered. The crew exchanged glances but obeyed. Their weapons lanced into the dark, carving paths through endless defenders. Shields collapsed. Repairs failed faster than they could be made. Yet the Dauntless pressed on. One by one, Systems died, engines sputtered, weapons fell silent, but momentum carried them forward. When the last layer of shielding gave way, Holt knew they could not survive another volley. The Dauntless was seconds from obliteration. She turned to Reyes, voice low. "It's time." He nodded. No humor now, only certainty. They had prepared for this. An act so desperate no alien commander had dared consider it. The slipstream core, unstable from battle, could be detonated in controlled collapse. It would annihilate the ship, but the resulting implosion might tear the Woe's construct apart. Holt keyed the command sequence, then paused. She looked across her bridge, at faces smeared with blood and determination. None protested. None flinched. They had chosen this path together. "Transmit one last message," she said. Her voice steadied as the words formed. "To anyone listening, survival isn't safety. It's defiance. Remember that." The message streaked across the void as the Dauntless dove into the construct's maw. For a heartbeat, the universe held its breath. Then light swallowed everything. The implosion ripped the core asunder, collapsing it into silence. Across the battlefield, Woe vessels convulsed, losing cohesion, falling to pieces like puppets cut from their strings. The swarm, once endless, disintegrated into wreckage. The Council fleets, stunned, surged forward at last, finishing what humanity had begun. When the light faded, nothing remained of the Dauntless. Only fragments drifted, glowing embers against the stars. Silence reigned in the aftermath. For long minutes, no one spoke. Alien commanders, hardened by centuries of survival, felt a weight they could not name pressing against their chests. Koresh, watching from his vessel, finally broke the stillness. "They gave themselves," he whispered, "and in doing so, gave us back our future." The word spread, carried by comms, repeated by voices across fleets and worlds. Humanity, the fragile newcomers, had done what the ancients could not. They had faced oblivion and chosen defiance over surrender. In the days that followed, debates consumed the Council. Some argued that humans were too dangerous to be trusted, that their recklessness threatened stability. Others claimed humanity was the galaxy's last hope, a reminder that survival required more than caution. Yet beneath every argument pulsed the undeniable truth. The Woe had fallen because humans had dared. On Earth, memorials rose not in sorrow but in pride. Names of the dauntless crew were etched into stone and steel, spoken as symbols of courage. Hope became legend, her final message replayed in every tongue, her defiance woven into the identity of her people. Koresh visited the human homeworld months later, walking beneath skies heavy with clouds and rain. He watched children run laughing through streets, unafraid of storms, and understood. These beings had never sought eternity. They had sought life in its fiercest, brightest form, and in doing so they had given the galaxy more than survival. They had given it fire. The war was not over. Fragments of the Woe still lingered in the dark, and new threats would come. But the galaxy no longer faced them alone. Humanity had proven itself not as conquerors, nor as caretakers, but as something rarer, a species that refused to accept inevitability. Koresh returned to his vessel, carrying the memory of laughter and storm. He knew the galaxy would change in ways no council could predict. But for the first time in uncounted cycles, he welcomed change. Somewhere in the void, Holt's final words echoed still. Survival isn't safety, it's defiance. And defiance, Koresh thought, was the heartbeat of life itself. Word count 1,000. Do you want me to compile all 3 sections into a single flowing 3,000-word manuscript, or keep them separated for now, so you can revise each individually? Here's Section 4, written to extend the narrative naturally, while staying tight and purposeful at 1,000 words. The galaxy did not rest in the shadow of victory. The destruction of the Woe's core had brought peace only in fragments, fragile and uncertain. Where once there was terror, now there was silence, and in silence, suspicion grew. Humanity had proven itself, but proof did not breed trust. On the Council's central world, beneath spires of crystal that pierced the upper clouds, delegations gathered once more. They spoke not of gratitude, but of consequence. Some demanded humans be honored as saviors, given equal voice among the elder species. Others whispered of restraint, of isolation, fearing what such reckless courage might ignite. Koresh sat among them, his carapace dim with unease. He had seen the dauntless fall, seen Holt's sacrifice, and something in him had shifted forever. He no longer believed in the old doctrine of survival through stillness. Yet he felt the pull of his people's caution, a voice urging him to contain what he could not fully understand. Humanity was a flame, bright, inspiring, but dangerous if left untended. The chamber doors opened, and humanity entered. Not Holt, for she was gone, but those who had lived through the fire. Reyes walked at their front, shoulders squared, his humor sharpened into something harder. His presence carried the same raw energy as Holt's, but edged with grief, a man who laughed now not to deflect fear, but to defy despair. Behind him came scientists, soldiers, diplomats, faces weathered by survival, eyes lit with a hunger the council still struggled to name. Reyes did not bow. He simply spoke. You asked us to stand against the woe. We did, and we bled for it. Now you ask what role we should play in your council. My answer is simple. We don't ask permission to survive. The words struck like a blade. Some recoiled, hissing of arrogance. Others leaned forward, caught by the echo of Holt's defiance. Koresh rose, mandibles clattering softly. Perhaps, he said, what they offer is not arrogance, but memory. They remind us of what we once were before fear hollowed us. The chamber erupted into argument. Accusations and praise tangled together, voices rising until the air itself seemed to shudder. Reyes stood unmoved, waiting, as though he had already accepted that change came only through conflict. That night, Koresh sought him out. They met on a balcony overlooking the city's endless glow. The human leaned against the rail, gaze fixed on the stars. You think we're dangerous, Reyes said without turning. Koresh hesitated, then nodded. Yes, you burn too brightly, and those who burn may consume as much as they illuminate. Reyes smiled faintly. Holt used to say fire isn't meant to be safe. It's meant to keep the dark away. The Dairan studied him, realizing how deeply Holt's words had scarred themselves into her crew. They carried her not as memory, but as a creed, one that shaped every breath. Before Koresh could respond, alarms split the night. Across the city, defense grids flared to life, beams lashing into the sky. Something moved beyond orbit, shards of the woe, remnants that had survived the collapse, drawn now to the council's heart. The council panicked. Fleets scrambled, but their unity fractured into hesitation. Orders contradicted one another, paralysis returning like a disease. Only the humans moved with clarity. Reyes ran to his vessel, a smaller craft gifted by reluctant allies. His crew followed without question, as if Holt herself still commanded them. Koresh, against every instinct, joined them. As the ship tore free of the planet's gravity, the enemy appeared, black silhouettes of broken machines, still dangerous despite their ruin. They hurled themselves at the city, desperate to devour what they could not conquer. Reyes's voice cut across the comms. We're not letting them finish what they started. We end this here. The battle that followed was a mirror of the first, yet sharper, more personal. The humans fought with ferocity born not only of survival, but of vengeance. They darted through the enemy, turning wreckage into weapons, collapsing enemies against one another. Koresh watched in awe, realizing that whereas people calculated, humans improvised. Whereas people hesitated, humans leapt. But the swarm was relentless. The council fleets wavered, unwilling to commit. Reyes knew the fight could not be won by defense alone. He looked to Koresh. Your people are watching. If they see you hesitate, they'll hesitate too. If they see you fight, maybe they'll remember what courage looks like. The words cut deeper than any blade. Koresh, for the first time in his long life, gave the order to charge. His fleet, startled, obeyed. Other species followed, momentum spreading like fire through dry grass. For the first time in centuries, the council fought as one. Together, they burned the swarm from the sky. When the last fragment fell, silence followed, heavier than applause. The city below was safe, its towers gleaming against the dawn. Reyes stood at the bridge, chest heaving, sweat darkening his collar. Koresh felt something strange stir within him, not fear, not caution, but pride. The council reconvened in the days after, but the arguments were different now. Humanity's place was no longer a question of merit, but of necessity. They had reminded the galaxy that survival was not merely endurance. It was will, sharp and unyielding. As debates raged, Reyes stood quietly at the chamber's edge. He did not demand, did not plead. He only waited, certain that time itself would bend to the human way, just as the council had been in battle. Koresh approached him once more. "You are dangerous," he said again, but this time his mandibles clicked with something close to respect. "And perhaps that is exactly what we need." Reyes looked up at the stars beyond the chamber's open dome. "We're not here to be safe. We're here to keep the dark away." And for the first time, Koresh believed him. Word count, 1,000. Do you want to keep building more sections into a longer serialized arc, like a novel structure? Or would you prefer I conclude the story fully with Section 5 as a final epilogue?